All right, so you've said in some really fascinating stuff about building a marriage that really lasts and not just kind of limps along,
Sure.
And what we're going to try to do is go through this stuff and figure out the key things that make relationships work.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it because, a lot of times people are kind of sold this fairy tale notion of what marriage is.
Right.
And what we see here in the material you sent is that it's not about it's about building something really solid and making it last. And a lot of that comes down to just putting in the work day in and day out.
Yeah, effort and intention.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, so let's start with a concept that pops up right at the beginning, and it seems to sort of underpin everything else we're going to talk about, and that's honesty.
Right.
And it might seem obvious,
Yeah.
tell the truth, but this source really digs into what real honesty looks like when you're trying to build a life with someone.
I think that's such a great point. And what I find really interesting here is the emphasis on being honest up front. It's not just about avoiding those big betrayals later on down the line.
Yeah.
It's about really developing a habit of sharing everything.
Right.
Your thoughts, your feelings, your
Yeah.
experiences from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're building this super strong foundation of trust.
Yeah, and it specifically says, don't try to present like a curated version of yourself.
Right.
Don't hide your expectations. Don't have a bunch of unspoken assumptions.
Exactly.
And it's about asking those direct questions early on. Sometimes even tough questions, like you're already picturing this person as your partner.
Right.
And it even says, ask the right questions.
Yes.
Like there are specific questions that are important to ask.
Yeah. And not only asking them, but really listening to the answers.
Right.
Paying attention to how clear and direct the other person is.
Right. So this kind of leads into a point about the honesty that you have with yourself. Because the material, emphasizes that you have to be honest with yourself about your own flaws, about your vulnerabilities, about the things that you really want deep down. Because if you're not being honest with yourself, how can you offer that to someone else?
That is so true. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook.
Right.
It's easy to focus on being honest with your partner,
Right.
but that internal honesty, that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I can see how if you don't have that kind of honesty at the beginning, if you're kind of shading the truth or being dishonest with yourself about what you want, it can just build resentment over time.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this slow leak,
Mhm.
it just starts to erode the relationship from the inside out.
Exactly. And so then building on that, that honesty, that the source talks about loyalty.
Right.
And this isn't just about, the obvious definition of loyalty.
Sure.
It's about that unwavering commitment, that sense of, having each other's backs no matter what. And it even says, straight up, if loyalty's been a problem for either person in the past,
Mm.
it's something to think long and hard about before getting married.
And that is such an important point
Yeah.
because if you think about it in the bigger picture, loyalty provides that sense of safety,
Yeah.
that sense of predictability in the relationship. It's knowing that your partner's always going to be there for you, that they're
Yep.
putting your bond above anything else.
And I mean, life's going to throw stuff at you.
Of course.
And knowing that you've got that support, that must be really, really grounding.
It is. It's a huge source of strength for a lot of couples.
So the source also talks about, temptations are going to happen.
They do.
And loyalty is about choosing to protect the relationship from that.
Right. It's an active choice.
And it's not just about being physically faithful, right? It's about the emotional support, the mental support.
Absolutely. It's about being present for your partner on every level,
Right. Being there for them.
supporting them through thick and thin.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of honesty and loyalty, and then the source talks about agreements, which sounds kind of contractual.
I know, right? It sounds a little bit formal, but what's really interesting here is how the source reframes agreements.
Okay.
It's not about having this cold, legalistic contract.
Yeah.
It's about having these practical, everyday rules of engagement for your marriage.
Okay, so like guidelines.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's about figuring out how you're going to navigate life together.
Right.
From the big stuff like finances
Mm.
to the everyday stuff like chores.
Right.
It's like creating a shared operating manual for your relationship.
I like that. And so by talking about these things early on, even if it's just starting the conversation, you can avoid a lot of the arguments and the friction that can come up later.
Absolutely, because misaligned expectations, those are a huge source of conflict in relationships.
Right. You think you're on the same page and then you're not
Exactly. So by making these agreements, even if they need to change as life goes on,
Yeah.
you're building this framework for how you're going to function as a team.
And the source even mentions, revisiting these agreements periodically because what works in the beginning might not work 5 years later.
Exactly. Life changes, people change,
Yeah.
and your agreements need to reflect that.
Right. So moving on from the practical side of things, the source talks about shared values, which sounds a lot more, kind of heart-centered.
Yeah. And this is really the core of a true partnership.
Yeah.
Because when you and your partner share those fundamental beliefs about life,
Right.
whether it's about family or career or spirituality or personal growth,
Yeah.
it creates this natural harmony in your decision-making and your overall direction as a couple.
That makes sense. And so when those big life decisions come up, having those shared values can make it so much easier to navigate them.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
you're both operating from the same moral and ethical compass.
Right. You're coming at it from the same place. So the source does acknowledge that it's okay to have some differences.
Right.
In fact, it can even be enriching.
Yeah.
But those core values need to be there.
They do. They're the foundation.
Okay. So we've got, the what we believe in, and now let's talk about how we treat each other on a daily basis, and that's where respect comes in.
Right.
And the source seems to be really serious about this one.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is how the source defines respect.
Okay.
It's not just about being polite.
Right.
It's about truly recognizing and appreciating your partner's individuality.
Okay.
It's about valuing their unique perspectives, their opinions, their choices, even when they're different from your own.
So it's about more than just tolerating those differences. It's about actually valuing them.
Exactly. It's about seeing the value in your partner's unique perspective.
And this goes back to that active listening.
Right.
Really listening without judgment, trying to understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
creating that environment where both partners feel valued and heard. And that creates such a positive and supportive space for both of you to thrive.
The source also mentions that disagreements are going to happen.
Of course.
It's inevitable.
It's part of being in a relationship.
Right. But it's how you handle those disagreements
Exactly.
that can lead to growth.
It's about communicating respectfully.
Right.
Even when you're feeling angry or frustrated.
And this leads to a point about self-control, which the source is really adamant about.
Yes, it actually says that you need 100% self-control in a marriage.
Wow.
And that's a high bar.
Yeah.
But it really emphasizes how important it is to not let your emotions get the better of you.
And it even suggests therapy as a way to learn how to manage conflict respectfully.
Right. Because sometimes we need help developing those skills.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got respect, and then the source talks about understanding, which sounds kind of similar, but it's not quite the same thing, is it?
It's not. It's definitely related, but understanding goes deeper than just listening to what your partner's saying.
Okay.
It's about empathy.
Right.
It's about putting yourself in their shoes and trying to see the world from their perspective.
Really try and get where they're coming from.
Exactly. And validating their feelings and experiences even when you don't agree with them.
So it's about that deeper connection.
Yes, that real intimacy that comes from feeling truly understood.
And I can see how that would be so helpful when things get tough.
Or absolutely.
Mm.
It's knowing that your partner gets you,
Right.
even when you're not at your best. And that can be so comforting.
Okay. So then there's this element of sacrifice, which I think can be a tough one for some people.
It can be,
Huh?
because a lot of times we think of sacrifice as giving up something that's important to us.
Yeah.
But the source makes it clear that it's not about that.
Okay.
It's about making compromises for the good of the relationship.
Right.
It's about shifting from me and mine to us and ours.
Just about the team.
Exactly. And finding that balance where both partners can still thrive, even if it means setting aside your own preferences sometimes.
Yeah. And the source even gives some examples like giving up personal time or adjusting your lifestyle to accommodate your partner's needs.
Right. It's about those everyday actions that show you're committed to the relationship.
Right. You're putting in the effort.
Exactly. And those small sacrifices, they really add up over time.
And then the last element that the source talks about is giving. And this seems to cover a lot of different things, not just material gifts, but also emotional and even spiritual generosity.
Absolutely. It's about showing up for your partner in every way possible.
And the source is pretty clear about this one. It says 100% giving every single day.
Yes, and it cautions against keeping score.
Which is so easy to do.
It is, but it's so destructive.
Yeah.
So it's about coming into the relationship with this mindset of wanting to contribute to your partner's happiness.
And the source says that if you've chosen the right partner, that giving will be reciprocated.
Exactly. It creates this beautiful cycle of generosity and love.
And so that giving can look like a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, it can be giving your time, your attention, your affection.
Mm,
It can be supporting your partner's dreams, even if you don't fully understand them.
right.
It can be celebrating their successes and comforting them when they fail.
And all of that creates this really nurturing environment.
It does. It creates a space where both partners feel loved and supported.
So it seems like all of these things are interconnected.
They are.
Honesty leads to understanding,
Right.
which leads to respect,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it easier to sacrifice
Yes.
and to give.
It's all part of the same fabric.
And beyond these big concepts, the source also offers some really practical tips for putting these ideas into action.
Yeah, and these are the things that you can actually do on a daily basis to strengthen your relationship,
Okay, like what?
like making sure you're communicating regularly,
Right.
having those meaningful conversations, checking in with each other,
Yeah.
spending quality time together.
Right.
Whether it's a date night or just hanging out at home without distractions,
Right.
expressing appreciation for each other.
Just saying thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those small gestures can make a big difference.
Yeah. And then developing healthy ways to resolve conflict.
Right. Learning how to disagree without being disrespectful.
And knowing when it's time to seek professional help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a little extra support.
So these are all things that you can actually do to make a difference.
They're the building blocks of a strong and healthy relationship.
And the source kind of wraps up this whole section by saying that a lasting marriage isn't something that just happens.
Right.
It takes effort, it takes dedication, and it takes love.
It does. It's a conscious choice.
And I really liked how the source says that it's not about finding the perfect partner.
Yeah.
It's about being the perfect partner.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective.
It is. It's taking responsibility for your own role in the relationship.
Exactly. It's about focusing on what you can do to make the relationship stronger.
So to kind of sum up all of this, a strong and fulfilling marriage, it doesn't just appear out of thin air. No.
It's built through honesty, loyalty, clear agreements, shared values, respect, understanding, sacrifice, and giving.
And it's a journey. It's something that you work on every single day.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process.
It is.
So thinking about this idea of being the perfect partner,
Mm-hmm.
which of these elements really stands out to you right now?
That's a great question.
And how can you maybe cultivate that in your own relationships?
What's one small step you can take today?
Thank you so much for sharing these sources with us
Of course.
and for letting us kind of dive deep into them with you.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope this has given you some new insights and some fresh perspectives on building a marriage that really lasts.
Me too.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.